All right, now we're going to talk. Your chapter reading this time for Chapter 5 dealt a lot with revenues. So we're going to talk about the importance of revenues, even as a building principal, and how important it could be. So one of the things I want you to think about is, before you become a principal, has attendance ever been something that's popped up in your mind about how important attendance could be? So with that said, there's a few things that impact attendance. The school calendar, certification, and weighted average daily attendance. That's what weighted WADA stands for. The calendar, every school has to develop a calendar. They have to follow some requirements put forth by legislation. Of course, number of days, number of hours, minimum requirement for 1 day. Core data, which is our reporting system through DESE. On core data, you have to report. You have to put in a calendar in August before school starts. And then in June, you have to go in and fix it for any changes that happen through the year. For example, if you dismiss early because of weather, or if you had a snow day. Certification is another area that is very important. How certification can impact funding. Paid per student per certified class. So if someone is not appropriately certified, you could lose funding for every student that's in that class per minute that they're in there. So that's why it is so important to make sure that your teachers are certified in the appropriate areas. So we're going to talk a little bit about weighted average daily attendance. So what I'm talking about here is average daily attendance plus your summer school plus all your weighted groups. And we're going to talk about that moving on to the other slides here. So, some more information about attendance. Attendance plays an important role on your APR, as you know. And I know I've been talking about funding because this is a finance class, but doesn't mean that it's not important. So on your APR, attendance, especially in both buildings, is in all buildings, is part of your APR score. Student achievement. I think everybody's aware that students that are absent a lot suffer when it comes to student achievement. Funding, you'll see here in a minute how student attendance can impact your funding in a big way, both on your state payments and your sales tax. So let's talk about weighted average daily attendance. First, you start with your regular term ADA. So at the end of the year, you take the total number of hours that the students attended and you divide by the total number of hours possible. That gives you a percentage. And then you take that percentage times your enrollment, how many students are actually enrolled, and that gives you an ADA number. So in this example, if you look at it, you have 500 students enrolled, and then you have total number of hours that the students attended, which would be this number right here, divided by this number right here, which is the total number of hours that school was in session. Then you get your percentage, and you take that percentage times your enrollment, and you get your average daily attendance. Then, if you offer summer school, you take the total number of hours attendance by students in summer school, add them all up together, and you divide that by 1,044, and you get an additional number, which is this number right here. You add that to your prior number that you got in your regular term ADA, if you remember, was this number right here. Add those two together, and you get your total ADA, which is that number right there. You don't need to know how to do this math. I just want you to understand how important attendance can be when we're talking about funding. The other areas that impact your weighted average daily attendance is you get extra count for free and reduced, for IEP, and for ELL students. So free and reduced, you take your total ADA and times the threshold. So for each one of these groups, they set a threshold, and if you have more students that are above the threshold, so let's say, for example, the threshold was 50 students, and you had 60 students, that means you have 10 students above the threshold. So that's the first step, is you have to figure out how many students are above the threshold. So you can do those calculations. When you find out how many students are above the threshold for free and reduced lunch, then you get to multiply it times 0.25. So that means every free and reduced lunch student that is above the threshold gets counted as 1.25 students. And this is helpful. So then this number gets added to your ADA. Next, same thing with special education. Special education threshold is obviously a little lower than free and reduce, but the same concept. However many students you have that are above the threshold, which would be this number right here, then what you would do is you take that number, and for IEP students, they count as 1.75. So that's quite a bit of an increase, and it's kind of a way of the formula to compensate because it costs more money to educate these students. So again, what they did here is they took the weighted ADA, multiplied it times the threshold. That told them how many students were at the threshold. And in this case, they had 87 students that had an IEP. So you take the 87 minus the 56,1182, and you end up with the 30.8868. Last category is limited English proficiency. And then this is the same thing. Multiply times the threshold. Find out how many students it takes to meet the threshold. Subtract that from how many students you have. And then you get a total number. So you subtract, you multiply that number, and in this case it's 60%. So a little less than IEPs, but any student that's above the threshold for LEP would count as a 1.6 on your weighted ADA. So that is how that works. At the end, what you do is you add all of those numbers up. So you have your regular term ADA, you have your summer regular term includes the summer school, which is your total ADA. Then you add your free and reduce, your special education, and your LEP. And you end up with a total which is usually higher than your enrollment, which in this case was 500 students. So, the reason this is important, on the formula you get paid based on how much your weighted average daily attendance is. So for example, at Knox County, we get approximately $2,400 per weighted ADA. So if you think about that, you end up with a lot of ways that you can increase your funding when it comes to looking at student weighted ADA. So so state funding, and if you take this 518 and you multiply that times $2,400, that's going to be quite a bit. So if you think about every student that you can add, and you're getting $2,400 for that student, that's quite a bit of money. The other thing that's impacted for students, now this $2,400, that's specific to to Knox County. Every district is going to be a little bit different depending on how much local funding and other funding that you get. As far as the sales tax, when people pay sales tax, it gets collected at the state level, and then it gets distributed to schools. Schools, I'm going to say right around $980 per prior year weighted ADA. So here's another area that if your weighted ADA is up, if you can increase it, then the sales tax goes off of the prior year weighted ADA. So again, beneficial every year to make sure that your weighted ADA is as high as it can be. Not to mention when, for example, if a student's on free and reduced lunch, you get more revenues from the federal government. You actually get paid more per lunch if a student's on free and reduced than you do if a student pays the full price. Now that's different for every school based on depending on what full price lunch is, but you do get more paid from the federal if they're on free or reduced than you do get for the full price. That is why it is important if you have people in your community that qualify for free and reduced lunch and they're not on your free and reduced lunch, they are actually hurting the school because that money is going to some other school. So it's important to get as many people that qualify for free and reduced lunch to be on your free and reduced lunch program. They can increase the amount of money that you get from your basic formula. They can increase the amount of money that you get in sales tax because of the weighted ADA, and they can increase the amount of money that you get from the federal food service program. So three big ways that you can impact, and really by the time you think about it, you're probably getting closer, Knox County is probably getting closer to $4,000 per weighted ADA that's added on there. So you add 4 free and reduced lunch students, you're adding $4,000 right there. So the importance of making sure that students are on free and reduced lunch if they qualify. The other thing I wanted to talk about